People of Britain, I stand before you today, on this blissfully British day, along the quays of Portsmouth docks, to address the dire situation that developed out of Philadelphia. It is with a heavy heart that I tell you that our colonial navy suffered a great defeat whilst defending our subjects abroad, who are currently under threat by the tyrannical and warmongering French and Spanish navies. Calling this event a tragedy would be an injustice to those who gave up their lives. While the loss of so many lives, the lives of our sailors, is saddening, yes, know in your hearts that they died defending Britain and her subjects from what would be an even more tragic fate. Whilst the defeat looks dire, our allies were able to capitalize and strike back at the French and Spanish fleets, and this will not come without great cost to the dishonorable nations of the continent. Britain is steadfast with her allies, and we will recover, and we will fight back. I have every confidence that every Englishman shall do their duty in this. Whether we engage them off Chesapeake Bay, or the Dogger Bank, or even here in Portsmouth Harbour, we will continue the fight. We will never give up. We will keep on fighting these aggressors who have attacked us without so much a declaration of war and put innocent lives in the wake of artillery. I finish this address with another plea to the nations of this world who do stand for liberty, justice. Now is the time to stand in the path of the warmonger, to be the immobile boulder in the road, to block the path of tyranny. It is time to take a stand. It is more important than the lives of every Englishman here. It is more important than Great Britain at this point. France and Spain will not cease unless we make them cease. It is up to all of us to defend the status quo and uphold honor, freedom, and liberty. To all of you who are already fighting, whether that be under a British banner, a Dutch banner, a Portuguese banner, I thank you. Keep up the good fight. You are fighting for everybody, lest we see a French king of all and a Spanish lapdog at its feet. Let us not let this go unanswered for. Thank you.
And welcome back for another episode, and first of all, thank you, Midgeman, for the speech. And as you heard in the speech, we will focus on rebuilding this year, for the most part. First of all, we did get a decent income, so now we actually have treasury again. And it should stay that way, at least for this year. I mean, we will be using a fair bit on building ships, expanding shipyards and such. But overall, it should still be a net positive income. Now, we are going to be setting up some colonies here in the North Sea, actually. We're going to set up a colony in Portsmouth. It doesn't have huge resources, but it is easy to colonize. I mean, if we have a look, that's the North Sea A2. It has... Well, actually, the numbers of resources are actually pretty high, but the accessibilities are just very low. But at the same time, it doesn't have colonization cost. So we can easily just start shipping people in there. And then there's the 2 moons next to London, which have a lot better resources, but they have colonization cost of 2, so that requires 200 infrastructure per million in population, which isn't the worst. We'll start building some of the infrastructure in London now. We'll start shipping them there as soon as we can. And then basically what we'll do is we'll combine the resources of all these 3 to Portsmouth, just so that they'll have at least a decent collection of different resources. And then we might be able to set up some... Actually, no, it doesn't have stone, but we can probably transport some stone from London. For example, to set up some shipyards there and so forth, just so that we can spread out a little bit over here. In case the enemy attacks London, which hopefully they don't. And we do have currently the scout over here is going to return to London to refuel, but we've sent another one, and then we've sent a scout from London, the fastest ship that we have currently, one of the newer 6 trades. It's going to go to Brest, or at least close enough to Brest that it can see what the enemy fleet there is, and then returns back to London. Now, it is true that the enemy will most likely be able to spot the ship quite far away, and they might send something to meet us halfway there. Well, not halfway, but close enough. But whatever intel we can gather from the ships, I mean, that 6th rate is so quick that I don't think the French have anything that can catch up with it. So as long as we can keep them far enough so that they can't fire, then they can't do anything. And we are doing similar operation to Quebec from our ships, or the brigs that we had that sank the French support vessels in the American East Coast that are now in Labrador Sea right now, but one of them will go to Quebec and then return. And even those should be fast enough so that the French can't do anything about it. But we want to kind of have an idea of how many ships the French have and where. I think Brest and Quebec are the most likely options. Now, we've also sent set up some convoys from Philadelphia to Port Royal to bring in some iron and stone, I believe, to Port Royal, and then from London to India we'll be sending a fair bit of resources, including bronze, iron and stone. Now, that convoy is going to take about 2 years to reach there, so that's going to take a while. But at the same time, once we get those resources there, we can start building shipyards and other stuff in India, which will help us a long way. At the same time, we'll be taking some colony ships there as well, so that we can actually start colonizing the colony that we have kind of designated in the Lacative Sea. We haven't had a colony ship in there, so we haven't been able to do anything about that. There is also another colony in Hudson Bay that we might be colonizing. I'm not sure if I've set up the orders to start colonizing it yet, but if I haven't, I probably should. It's not too far off from Fort Rupert, and it has a very good server potential. So even though right now it doesn't have... well, it has a lot of iron, almost 46 million, but the accessibility is so terrible, so that there's not going to be a lot of resources being mined there yet. But with the survey resource, if they are good, then we might be able to get a lot more resources in there. And if we have a quick look at the map, we can actually see where it is. Hudson Bay, it's over there, and here's the Fort Rupert right now, so it's not that far off. No, we actually have a colony ship here right now. Oh, actually we have set up the Hudson colony fleet already, good. Now, there's been some peace talks going on, but I don't think, so far nothing has come out of it, but if there is, then there's probably going to be a separate video of a peace conference. Potentially, we'll see about that. I'll keep you updated. And then, of course, we've set up some of the governors for our future colonies already, so that's going to be good. But yes, for the most part, we'll be focusing on upgrading our ships. Doing some redesigns, retooling the shipyards for the newer designs and so forth. So we'll mostly focus on rebuilding and upgrading, and then keeping an eye on what the enemy is doing, and we'll be on the defensive for the most part this year. We've finally got the updated 8-pounders, so we've updated the designs of our 4th and 5th rates. Now, we've decided to ditch the chaser cannons from both of these to give a little bit extra room, especially for the new gunpowder storages, because they do require a bit more gunpowder, but they do have twice the firing speed. And the range of cannons technically is still the same. We might want to get a little bit higher range from our fire controls at some point, but that is going to have to wait a little bit. But with the new designs, they are going to be updated with the new sails, of course, and, well, from the HX 1702 version, the 1703 version, has a little bit different. There's the chaser cannons were gotten rid of and so forth, and there's a bit of extra range. The range is now 50 billion. Over here it's 45 billion on the 4th rate, but it's alright. But the fact that we can now fire twice as quickly with essentially the same broadside as before, although actually, alacrity, the broadside size is actually a little bit increased now, so they will be even more effective. But anyway, we'll start retuning some of the shipyards to be able to build these. I mean, the only ships that we have is in London, so we'll start updating those so that we can start building these and start updating more of our ships. Our scouting of Brest didn't go quite as planned. The French have sent 5 frigates to meet us. And of course we do have the higher speed, so we'll probably just turn around a little bit and make sure that we lose them. Although, well, it is very likely that they will spot us no matter what, so we probably won't get closer than this. So what I think I'll do is I'll maybe... I'll probably sail directly to the North Sea, actually. And just hope that they will lose the track of me. On the other hand, if I could use, for example, the waypoint 3 over there, I could potentially do similar scouting on the El Peril over here, but on the other hand, I think getting back home is... getting back home alive is more important right now, so what we'll probably do is we'll... one way or another, maybe use the waypoint 3 and then go to North Sea, just so that they lose track of us a little bit, and then not leading them directly, since on the other side we only have the one brig spotting, so I mean that does have a pretty high speed, so it can also escape, but I'd rather not have them know what I have there. We have now completed the updated cannon designs, so we are now updating our ground unit designs. There are quite a few of them. That does include the new coastal batteries as well, which do not only fire a lot faster, but some of them do actually, and also have a higher armor, but some of them do actually have higher accuracy as well at their max range. We have completed research on better maintenance, and now we started researching faster construction rate, which is hopefully going to help us rebuild our shipyards in various places. Also, we've finally finalized the upgrades to our first rate, so it will go about a bit under 6 knots, which is not too bad, and it has a huge amount of weaponry though. And it does have a decent range. It can go out for a year at a time. It actually has more than a year worth of fuel. And it has a maintenance life of over 9 years, so technically it can be out without maintenance for a while, but it is always a bit risky. Also, it should be able to carry 2 sections of marines, which is going to be good if we start utilizing boarding action a bit more. All in all, it's going to be a quite useful ship. Now, it is certainly expensive to make, although if we compare it to the old one, well, yeah, there is a quite significant increase in price. Of course, the armor is better and all that, there's so much more weaponry and so forth, so there is a lot of things that increase the price. Our ground unit updated designs are coming along quite nicely. There's still a little bit that we need to do, but we should be able to get through those relatively quickly. Looks like the enemy has spotted us again, so we'll probably try to drag them away from any of the waypoints right now. Probably go to the A2 over here, and then we'll return to the Labrador Sea, because I think we need to have some ships over there as well. But so far, not too bad. I mean, well, unfortunately, it is bad that we didn't see how many ships they have there again. Although we are faster than them. I'm just wondering, would it be possible to run them in circles and try to get closer, but that might be a bit too risky. They can always send in more and more ships to intercept me. So yeah, no, I'll just turn around. We know that they have at least a little bit ships here. I'm pretty sure that they have more. But you know what? I will try it. We just need to first make a, I don't know, a waypoint over here, just so that we can get far enough before they can catch us. Then we can start slowly turning around. Or we're going to run them in circles for a little while, and then hopefully we can slowly get the circle closer and closer, just close enough so that we can get a glimpse on what is in there. Right, so we have set up a elaborate plan. It will be a 2-circle approach here. So we'll first go around here, go around there, and then a little bit smaller circle. It is very unlikely that this will actually work, but we can probably scout out a little bit more on what their strength actually is. Hopefully, at least. We'll keep on doing this for the time being. We do not have any eyes on the enemy ships that were chasing us, but that doesn't mean that they are not chasing. They were also bricks, so they were a bit trickier to spot, but they might be quite far behind. We're slowly turning to a second, or rather our first approach on this maneuver here, towards get back here. Hopefully we can spot at least a little bit more, but I'm not entirely sure if we can. But we'll see about that. I mean, with the maneuvers here, just hopefully we don't use too much fuel on this, because we were already relatively low. I mean, well, we still got 65%, so we've used about 1% of fuel on this already, but hopefully we can get a glimpse on the harbor itself, or at least a bit more information about their ships in here, because all we know so far is that they have 4 bricks here, and there's not a lot to go on. We have now spotted another 2 enemy bricks approaching us, so what we'll do instead, we know that, well, actually we don't know if there's anything behind us anymore. They might have given up the chase, but these 2 seem to be entirely different ships from the previous group. So what we'll do is we'll turn back to go to waypoint here. I've reshuffled some of the waypoints a little bit here. So what we'll do is we'll go to waypoint 13, then 14, 15, 16. Hopefully at that point we'll get a glimpse on the harbour itself, and then back to waypoint 12 and back towards the Gulf of St. Lawrence A2, and then back to Lambert Sea. Now we have already used a bit more of the fuel. Well, actually, the percentage hasn't dropped yet, but we have used a fair bit of fuel maneuvering here, but this must be very frustrating for the enemies. Looks like we found the other fleet that was chasing us, so now we know for certain that they have at least 6 bricks here, which is still not a lot, but it would appear that we can probably escape between them towards here with our greater speed. I believe that should work, and then we'll probably try to go over there and try to get a glimpse on the port itself, and then escape from the place. They still keep trying. They've now sent 2 frigates ahead of us, so what we'll do is we're left and go around from the west and see if we can't get there from there. We just need to make sure that all the enemy ships are behind us, essentially, and then we can maneuver however we want, really. But they probably have a bit more ships there still. We just haven't gotten a glimpse yet of the port itself. We had now lost track of the 4 brick fleet here somewhere. It was sailing towards Quebec, so they are probably somewhere around here now, most likely. Now what I've decided to do is I'll sail through here towards the waypoint 20, and that should take us close enough to get a glimpse on the harbour itself, so we can kind of figure out what sort of navy we are up against here. I mean, we won't be hopefully fighting anyone right now, but to get an eye on how big of a fleet the French have here in the New World. We have spotted another 2 frigates trying to intercept us, but by the looks of it, it will probably take them long enough to intercept us somewhere around here that if we are lucky, we can get a glimpse on the harbour. And once we get a glimpse on the harbour, we don't actually need to stay here. We can just bugger off to the north first, and then start slowly getting our way back to the Labrador Sea. So I think we will indeed get a glimpse on Quebec, and we can then mark down how many ships there are actually, because that's going to be very valuable information. Huzzah! We can now see the enemy fleet in the port, and looks like there's at least 2 first rates, and there's 8 second rates, 14 third rates, potentially another 5, although some of these might actually be commercial vessels, come to think of it. But we know that there's at least 16 fourth rates and 23 fifth rates, and the smaller ones we can't actually see. We know that, actually, which one do we know? So we know that the Roans are the military vessel, and the others are most likely just support vessels. So if we have a look at that, that means that there's 14 third rates. Then there's these 3 classes are then commercial vessels. Actually, these 4, aren't they? Yeah, there's 4. And then there's but we know that there's a quite substantial fleet there. But now that we've gotten that intel, we can start running away and getting back home to St. John's. We have now completed research on better optics for our spyglasses, as well as the final mask design that we had. So we now started exploring ways to improve our gunpowder, as well as designing the new spyglasses for our ships, which some of them will increase the range a little bit that we can spot in, and some of them will lower the size a tiny bit. So it's a nice little balance there, and the best one that we have will actually have an extra 20% strength. We have completed the new spyglass designs. We've now decided to increase our efforts on increasing our optics further, so that we can perhaps take better use of our crow's nests and spot the enemies from further away. Our daring scout has now returned from Quebec, and the captain has been awarded the highest medal that we currently have, the Order of the Toast First Class, which is of course awarded as a reward for daring action against overwhelming odds. Our mineral transport to Port Royal has returned back to Philadelphia now, so we've already started producing a few things in here in Port Royal. First of all, we started building the naval shipyard again. Of course, it's going to take a while to be completed, but we can at least start it. And secondly, sooner or later, once we're done with the survey company, we'll start building some coastal fortifications up again, just so that we can defend the place. Of course, building those fortifications will take a long while, so that's going to be a problem for a while, but at least we now have the resources to do that. And once we get the survey company, we might actually eventually get the survey done here in Port Royal, which might provide us with extra minerals, or at least hopefully some better accessibilities, and honestly iron wouldn't hurt. But yeah, we have now the resources brought in here, so hopefully that will help a long way. A civilian investor decided to open a mining colony in the Caribbean, but it would appear that the French have already settled there, so our garrisons there have started battling. I'm not entirely sure which side is currently winning. Both sides are taking fairly heavy losses. That is pretty much all I know right now. We technically could send some reinforcements from Port Royal, but I don't want to take any troops away from there if I don't have to, because they still lack the coastal defenses. If the enemy wants, they can try attacking there, and we just need to make sure that we have strong enough defense there, so that it will be at least very costly, if nothing else. The battle in the Caribbean is still raging on. It's already been going on for 1.5 months, and our troops are about 10% of what we started with. So we'll probably lose soon enough, but we have managed to dig in fairly well there, so the damage that we take is not huge. It is a sad day. The civilian mining colony that we had over here has been taken over by the French. That was 3 civilian mining complexes that we lost. That would have been a nice boost to our income, but alas, it is now in the hands of the French. Our new coastal fortification design is finally completed. It will have 5 sections of 10-pounders and another 5 sections of 8-pounders. So the firepower compared to the old one does improve a fair bit, and while the total number of units goes down, the 8-pounders fire twice as fast as the old ones, and even the 10-pounders fire a little bit faster than the old 8-pounders, so the raw rate of fire is probably going up a fair bit, and the raw damage is certainly increasing quite a bit, as well as the ranges that the cannons will have will go up a fair bit, so we'll be able to fire upon the enemies quite far away, I feel like. Now, of course, building one of these is going to take a long while. It costs 650 points, and I think our construction rate is quite a bit lower, which means that, yeah, it's probably going to be about 2 years, maybe more, before we get any actually built. But we can probably start improving the ground force construction rate a little bit to speed it up. It would appear that our civilian sector is setting up yet another colony in the Caribbean on that same bloody island that we had our ass handed to us by the French. Now, to be fair, The French were left relatively weak, or at least very low on supplies over there, so we might stand a chance this time, but I don't know. I mean, if we don't win it, then we'll be granting the French yet another set of mining colonies. Let's actually, or civilian mining complexes, it's another 2. So that would make it, and I think altogether 5 that we would have given to them. I don't know, we may need to send in some troops from Port Royal just to aid that a little bit. Not too many, because we don't actually have a huge reserves in Port Royal in the first place. We can't bring in a lot there, but we might be able to bring in a battalion. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. We'll send in some reinforcements just to be able to capture all of that. And then we can dig in, and if the French try to attack there, then they're going to have to send in a fair bit of troops to actually beat us. Assuming that we can win. That's going to be the difficult part here. The ground-based survey of Port Royal has finally been completed, and we have found a lot of new minerals inland. Now, of course, the accessibility numbers are still quite dreadful, but now we at least have all the minerals present in the colony there. So we don't need to bring in more minerals from Philadelphia, although stone is a bit low, so that may prove to be a problem. But everything else is now in the tens of millions, so that should last for a while. Of course, the accessibilities are combined only 1.8, and that's quite bad. We're actually losing a fair bit of food over here, so we might have a problem at some point. I mean, we're still producing a fair bit, just not quite enough for the fuel refineries we have here, and we don't have a huge fuel reserve here either, so that might prove to be a problem. Also, the battles over here have been going pretty decent. Well, we've already run out of supplies there ourselves, and we've lost a fair bit of troops, but I think the enemy has lost more this time, so we might be winning that now, and we've managed to dig in fairly well already. I think we have the fortification bonus of 2 already there, so if we actually have a look. Okay, 1.67, so it's not that great, but we haven't lost more than maybe 500 tons worth of equipment out of the 3,800 that we started with. So that's going to be fairly good. I mean, we've run out of supplies, but we are going to be bringing in a battalion of men from Port Royal, which is going to be quite handy. The active ground sensor strength 12 has been researched, which is essentially better optics for us. We do need to get we do want to get the EM sensitivity 6 before we actually redesign our crow's nest, but those will then allow us to see a bit further away. We have now started researching the 12-pounder cannons, which will hopefully provide a lot more firepower for our ships. Unfortunately, it's going to take a while to be researched, so I don't think we'll be taking advantage of it anytime soon. But I think it will be good, and then we'll probably afterwards get the capacity recharge rate 3, which means that we can then fire 3 times as fast as the regular speed would be. And thus, our civilian mining colony emerged victorious against the French garrison. And with that, we now have a total of 9 civilian mining complexes in those colonies, if I'm not mistaken. There's 4 there, 3 over here, and another 2 there. Okay, so yes, we have 9 civilian mining complexes in these colonies. Now, of course, it will take some time before all of these are in good use, but they do produce a decent bit of minerals in there, which we will be buying, of course. And that will allow us to get a bit more minerals back to Port Royal. Of course, shipping the minerals back and forth is a tiny bit risky, but the fact that we now already produce everything in Port Royal is a good thing. And actually, they don't produce food there, which is a bit of a shame. And actually, we could probably use the internal mass drivers to combine the resources into one of the colonies. I'm not going to use the mass drivers from planet to planet, because that just doesn't make sense in the context of this game, but we can certainly gather them up in one port, so to speak. So we'll be gathering up a fair bit of minerals here and start shipping them back to Port Royal, which is going to help the economy there quite nicely. Of course, we are still working on getting some extra fuel refineries there, which will help getting the production up. We got 10 million liters of fuel reserves there right now. And then the naval shipyard complex is going to take a while still before it's completed, but once we get the fuel refineries Actually, we'll be getting the naval shipyard complex before we get the refineries. That's interesting. What I could actually do, since we do have production of everything, I could set up, I don't know, say 25 of these at 25%, and then modify that to 25%, and then up the queue. So we'll be able to upgrade our production speed a little bit. It means that the naval shipyard complex will be done a bit sooner. Hopefully, well, it's not going to be done next year yet, but the year after that is a possibility. I mean, it's very likely, actually, that it will be done then. The first-rate shipyard in London has now been retooled for the updated design. Now, of course, it's still very slow building there, to be fair. But we have also started retooling a fair bit of ships, and we just had 3 of our 4th rates retool. And now we are of course retooling more and more, but slowly but surely our fleet will be better. I mean, if we have a look at our home fleet a tiny bit here, we can see that from the 4th race, 3 of them have been updated, and the rest of them are, for the most part, already, well, they have the vertical fire controls, or vertical cannon controls, rather, and then there's some of the smaller vessels that have already been upgraded as well. Most of the bigger ships not yet, because we've been building ships while we've been retooling the shipyard, so that means that it's gonna take a while until we have room in the slipways themselves to actually retool the new ships. But our goal is to update this fleet pretty much entirely. We might build some extra ships as well, but getting the ships up to date is a bit more important, in our opinion. And there we have it, that's another episode. So there was a bit less action in this episode, but we've been focusing a lot on upgrading our fleet, and we have done a fair bit of work on that. We've also now retooled all the shipyards in London, so if we have a look at that, they are all up to date. We're adding some slipways to some of these, and there's still some old ships. Well, namely, there's actually only one old ship being built, and that's going to be ready in February next year. So we'll have that done relatively quickly, and we are focusing a lot on retooling. Now, we've also set up some industrial capacity to mass produce some cannons for our ships, just so that we'll be able to retool the ships or build new ones a little bit faster. Now, unfortunately, on our ship designs, the weaponry is only about 7 to 8%, depending on the ship type, of the total cost of the ship. So therefore, it's not going to have a huge impact on the build speed, but it is going to help a tiny bit at least. At the same time, once we get a bit more of the builds done here, although that's probably going to take a long while, but we can then maybe start producing some of the masts for our ships, because the masts are rather expensive. I think those are like the second most expensive. Other than that is the crew quarters, and then it might be actually the weaponry. I don't remember out of the top of my head, but it's like the, especially on the first rates, the top 4 things are armor, engines, crew quarters. No, there's engineering, and then there's the weaponry. So there are still quite a few things that we cannot produce. We could produce the masts and the weaponry, and then there's some other parts that we could produce. But we can't produce the crew quarters, the armor, or the engineering spaces, so that does limit the capabilities for us a tiny bit, but we can at least speed up things. Now, of course, we are going to get the naval shipyard complex in Philadelphia completed. Of course, that's going to take a while before it's usable, to be fair. We'll probably make it at least be able to produce 6 rates at first, and then just keep on expanding that. We might even construct another shipyard complex there, and maybe a civilian shipyard complex as well, just so that we'll be able to build a little bit more there. Then I believe, no, we're not building a shipyard in Fort Rupert quite yet, but that's probably something that we will do at some point, because they do have all the minerals, and they do have pretty good accessibilities as well. So we'll be able to get those relatively quickly, I think. And then, of course, we'll be getting the ground force construction complex. We have been producing a fair bit of more troops, and we are currently building troops pretty much everywhere where we can. And if we have a look at the research that we have currently going on, so we are still getting the regiment headquarters, which is the final one of the essentially new military reforms that we were doing. And then we'll start researching the ground formation construction rate. which allows us to train our troops a little bit faster. I mean, I don't actually know how huge impact it's going to be, but no doubt it's going to help. Especially since we are building a fair bit of fortifications still. Some of which are the updated design, but it's going to take a long while to build those, and in Portugal is still the old design, but that's going to be... Actually, that's still going to take over a year to be completed. Damn. Okay, I wonder... Oh right, we're building a naval shipyard complex over here in Portugal, but that's not going to be done next year. Probably not even... Well, it might be the year after that, I suppose, since we are building some construction factories, which will speed things up a little bit. But we are also researching the better gunpowder in Portugal, and in Philadelphia we are researching the 12-pounder cannons, because I feel like getting the bigger cannons, sure now they'll reload a little bit slower and all that, but they will do more damage, and they have much higher ranges, so giving us the advantage over the enemies. Of course the 12-pounders will take a bit more room than the 10-pounders, so we'll have perhaps a bit less on raw weapon groups doing the damage, but at the same time each of them will deal more damage. Then of course we are getting the construction rates sometime next year. It's going to be probably in the latter half. September is what I currently estimated, and it's probably going to be true. Now of course we do have the colony in Portsmouth, which actually doesn't have anything else but population right now. Like, it doesn't have anything else yet. We'll start focusing on increasing this a little bit, and we'll get maybe some mining going on here. Also, we do need to set up the colonies on the London's moons here, because they do produce some resources. Again, not huge quantities, but they will be useful. Unfortunately, they do require low gravity infrastructure, if I'm not mistaken. No, actually, it is just the regular infrastructure. Alright then. So we'll be able to just, if we produce some infrastructure, which we have produced to some degree already. Yeah, we got 250 produced, so we can start setting up colony, at least in one of these, without a problem. Actually, which one would be better? That's a 2.5 and it's 2.4. Okay, so this one might be better, although the selection of resources is a bit more limited, and the wood is going to go down relatively quickly. But yeah, we can set up a colony here, then we can set up another colony here, and we can start getting the resources from here to Portsmouth, just so that they have a bit more selection of what they can be producing here. And that's of course going to add in even more trade opportunities for us here in North Sea. And of course, something to note, right, we did start a colony in Hudson Bay, and there's good potential for a ground survey here, but we haven't gotten the survey teams there yet. Also, we haven't actually surveyed Fort Rupert itself either. But once we get the ground force construction complex, which is going to take a while still, but eventually we'll be able to build some there. I mean, essentially what we could do is we could train a survey company here and get a transport to transport that to Fort Rupert and then to the new colony there. That might be helpful. Of course, we haven't started the colony in India much because we don't have colony ships there, nor do we have freighters, if I'm not mistaken. But our convoy is currently in the South Atlantic going towards India, so it's already more than halfway through from the South Atlantic. So it will still take probably about a year to get there, but sooner or later we'll get there and we can start setting up a colony there, and those ships are probably not going to go back to London actually. We are probably going to go and retool some of our commercial vessels with the better engines, just so that we can get those be a bit more speedy, and therefore the trips would take a bit less time. Now, it's still probably going to take a long while to go from India to London, but it's somewhat historical, I suppose. Also in Caribbean, the French have now set up yet another mining colony in the same island that we've been fighting for a long while. Our troops, on the other hand, are only 2 weeks away. So we'll be able to get those in there, and we might be able to win this because our garrison, of course, now that they've fought already, are probably going to be losing that on their own. But with the reinforcement, we should be able to win. Now, of course, it is entirely possible that the French will then send in troops there, but that's going to be a nice distraction, in a way. I mean, at some point we probably do want to take over Port Royal. We're currently building some coastal fortification, not Port Royal, Tortuga, but we're currently producing coastal fortification in Port Royal, which is going to stop us from building more troops there for the time being. We'll probably be able to fix that eventually, but that will take some time. Now, another thing that I could potentially do is produce more troops in Philadelphia, and we can produce some troops in Philadelphia at least, and then transfer those to Port Royal bit by bit, and then eventually have enough troops for assault on Tortuga and capture it. Now, we haven't actually discussed about how to divide the Caribbean with the Dutch, because that's probably something that we do need to discuss. Maybe we could give, I don't know, the Dutch Havana will take Tortuga. There's an option, but we'll have to discuss about that. Of course, at the start of the year there were some discussions about a truce with the enemies, but they didn't go very far, so we will continue the war. But other than the troop transport and the convoy going to India, there's not a huge amount of movement right now, since we are focusing on defending and upgrading our ships and expanding our fleet in general. But we did have the quite daring adventure in Quebec earlier this year, which you probably haven't forgotten yet. In terms of wealth, we're doing alright. I mean, we don't have a huge income right now, so we do need to be a little bit careful to not stress our economy too much. I'm pretty sure that we can improve our economy next year a little bit further, but since we are on positive income, our trade deals will actually provide us with food. We don't have a huge food income, so we'll be getting a fair bit of food here in London instead. I mean, we do have a decent stockpile, but it is the smaller stockpile in London. And then, of course, in other places we are actually losing some. Now that's interesting. Now that might be due to the fact that we are running a bit low on resources here, so we do need to start expanding in East Coast at least to, you know, set up some more mining colonies so that we can keep the Philadelphia running, essentially, the industry there. Now in terms of civilian shipping, we still have 4 colony ships, and that's about it. But they're doing a decent job right now. I mean, they're mostly going between London and a few other places, so it's not too bad. We might actually make a Philadelphia sort of colonies as well, so they don't need to travel across the Atlantic constantly. That might actually be a good idea. But yeah, the civilian shipping hopefully will expand a bit more next year, because they haven't done all that much in all fairness. And then in terms of civilian mining colonies, we now have technically 4 of them. 3 of them are ours and 1 is the French, and we might be able to capture yet another French in this same island. It's a bit hilarious. I mean, one thing that we should probably do, first of all, we have been gathering the mining over here, haven't we? I believe we have. Yes, that seems to be the case. We do need to start bringing these minerals back to Port Royal for the time being. One thing that we could do is if we get some freighters in here, we might be able to get the deep space tracking stations on just one of these colonies. So with the extra troops heading in here, we should be able to defeat the French garrison without too much trouble, and then hold these colonies for the time being. I mean, they do produce a decent bit of minerals all in all. Like, total production is about 2,400, I think. Somewhere around there. On a yearly basis, which is not terrible, in all fairness. Now for next year, we will probably keep on upgrading our ship a fair bit and start expanding our navy a bit more. We did expand our navy to a certain degree by about 90 tons. No, 90,000 tons, sorry. So that should be something that we'll look into maybe doing a bit more, but getting our ships up to date is probably a bit more important than having a huge amount of ships. But all in all, this year was mostly about rebuilding, and I think we did manage to do that relatively well. And the fact that we didn't manage to get the intel on the enemy ships and in Quebec, and a little bit idea on how many of those ships are actually mobile, or were at the time anyway. It's been a while since we did that operation. We don't know exactly anymore. But I'm pretty sure that it will still take some time for them to do that, and unfortunately we don't know how much the enemy has ships in Brest. That might be quite a bit. Technically it would be possible to do the similar operation again. At the same time, I think that this time the enemy would be ready for it, so we do need to perhaps wait a little bit longer. But that was more or less it for this episode, so don't forget to check Midgeman's channels, links are down below in the description. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.